Welcome to the Flames of War field manual from the Dice Gods. Today we're going to look at the stuff that happens in between when your minis come out of the box and when the game kicks off. So that's how to read missions, selecting the missions at random, plus reserves, what they are and how they work, plus a little note on deployment. Our gratitude continues to Micro Studio, who have supported this series with their soon-to-be released 15mm World War II Normandy pre-painted terrain. You'll see quite a bit of this lovely terrain during the video, so eyes open. Thanks also to Micro Studio for the currently on screen 10% discount code which they've given us to give to you. This works across their site, so you can use it to grab yourself a deal on any type of terrain, tokens or bases. Finally, don't forget to comment on this video to be in with a chance to win one of two sets of the Hit the Beach 2-player Late War starter sets for Flames of War. Your first comment on each video will enter you into the draw, with entries closing at midnight Central European time on the 5th of March 2023. We'll draw the winners about a week later. The first winner will also receive a set of the Micro Studio terrain as well. Bonus. So, if you plan to play and win at Flames of War, there's one thing that's really essential. You actually have to know how to win, which means you need to know how to read the mission. As we discussed in our last video, there are two ways you can win: break your opponent's formation or complete your mission. With that in mind, we're going to take a look at the anatomy of a mission. What information do they contain, what's important, and what do some of the terms contained in them mean? For this video, we're focused only on the missions in the main rulebook. The missions in the various sourcebooks contain variations and exceptions to the ones in the rulebook, so we recommend that newbies stick to either the rulebook or starter set missions for their first few games. There are 6 basic missions and 4 more advanced missions in the main rulebook, which all follow the same core structure. Here's the first and most basic of the basic missions: Annihilation. As the name implies, everyone gets together and has a cuddle. Sorry, this mission is all about fragging your opponent. So let's look at the mission in detail. To start with, we have some fluff. If you need some motivation for your troops, here it is. Next, we have special rules. This is where you discover any reserves, restrictions or oddities in the mission. Setup defines who picks the board edge and also the areas in which objectives can be deployed if they're used in the game. Deployment, surprisingly, defines the area in which a player may deploy their forces, both in size and shape. This is also shown in the image of the map on the right of the page as well. Finally, winning the game defines how you achieve victory. As you'll see, Annihilation is pretty simple. Special rules we will come back to in a second. So setup, the attacker picks the board edge to deploy in, then both players alternate placing units within 12 inches of their board edge, starting with the attacker until all units are deployed. A player wins, as you see, when they've annihilated their opponent's formations. Under special rules, Annihilation has meeting engagement. This special rule means that the player who goes first has some disadvantages. Specifically, they cannot call in aircraft to attack in their first turn. All of their units count as having moved on the first turn. This has the effect of reducing the number of shots they can take or reducing the accuracy of their fire, and they cannot fire artillery bombardments on turn 1. Additionally, neither player can place a ranged-in marker, which they would usually do before the game starts. Ranged-in markers are used for firing artillery, so don't worry about them at this point, but it's a key difference with meeting engagement games. What meeting engagement does is reduce the effective benefit of going first on a game which is all about killing. If we look at another mission, Free for All, this is very similar to Annihilation, with meeting engagement special rule, the attacker picking an edge, and 12-inch deployment. But this one has objectives. Each player, starting with the attacker, places 2 objectives within an area of the opponent's deployment zone. The game is then won when a player holds one of the objectives, which they placed in the enemy's deployment zone. Holding an objective is simple. You need to have an infantry, tank or gun team within 4 inches at the start of your turn, and to end the turn, you're still there and there's no enemy infantry, tank or gun teams within 4 inches of the objective. Simple. Let's take a look at one of the other missions to see some of the other special rules you might face. Meet counterattack. Here you'll see our first mention of ambush and reserve. Next to each is which player is subject to these special rules. Ambush, as the name implies, suggests that a player has some military assets in hiding, ready to spring out at their poor unsuspecting enemy. The mission will let you know how many units you can hold in ambush. When it's time to spring the ambush, you place your ambush units anywhere in your deployment area, provided it is at least 16 inches from any enemy tank, infantry or gun team with line of sight, unless sneakily concealed by terrain, and at least 4 inches from all enemy tank, infantry or gun teams, regardless of concealment. An ambush unit doesn't count as moving when it appears. In fact, if you're placing infantry out of transports or gun teams, then they class as being in foxholes, which gives them some nice defensive buffs. There are 5 different flavours of reserve, but no matter the type, a player who is subject to a reserve rule must hold back a minimum of 40% of the points value of their army at the start of the game. You can, if you have your brave pants on, hold back more however. The handy chart, reproduced from page 104 from the small rulebook, lets you know how many points this is to put on the table. The rest is held back. A player with reserved units then rolls during their starting step to see which, if any, of these reserves make an appearance. If a player is successful and gets some reserves, then they move onto the table from the table edge which the mission specifies. If a unit has transports, then they come in at the same time in the same place as the unit itself. Now, let's look at the 5 different types of reserve. Immediate reserves. A player with immediate reserves rolls the same number of dice as the turn number. So 1 dice on turn 1, 2 dice on turn 2, etc. For each 5+ they roll, a unit comes in. If the player rolls 3 or more dice and gets no 5+, then 1 unit comes in automatically. Delayed reserves. This is the same as immediate reserves, but you start with 1 die at turn 3, which can seem like a very long time. Turn 4 is then 2 dice, turn 5 is then 3 dice, etc, etc. Deep reserves. With deep reserves you may only place 1 tank or aircraft unit on the table. The rest are held in reserve and rolled for depending on whether they are immediate or delayed. So what's a tank unit? In late war, that is a vehicle with front armour 4 or more. For mid-war, that is a vehicle with front armour 3 or more. Flanking reserves. This is a bit different. Here you only hold 1 or more unit in reserve, not the usual 40%. Any units which you do hold in reserve this way will arrive on the flank of the enemy. The flank they come in on will usually be on the map of the mission. Scattered reserves. This is a messy one. The players whose unit is in scattered reserves must roll a dice to find out which edge or corner it arrives from. So that adds to the fun. Not only are you waiting, but then they turn up at random. Awesome. The reserved special rules are frequently mixed together to create combos. For example, immediate scattered reserves would be rolled for from turn 1, and any results of a 5+ would then result in the owning player rolling to find out where the arriving unit appears on the battlefield. Conversely, delayed flanking reserves don't start rolling until turn 3 and come in where the map dictates. Does that make sense? You'll have probably seen a lot of talk about the attacker and defender and be wondering how you get to be the attacker or defender. There are 3 ways to decide. First, you can roll a dice with the winner choosing. Second, the player with the most infantry team can automatically be the defender. The last way is to use the battle plan system. This uses a system where both players pick whether they want to attack, maneuver or defend. Then you compare that. Never mind. Read it in the book. It's on page 114 of the small rule book, and it's easier to read than explain. If you're struggling to choose which mission to play, then using the basic missions, you'll see they'll have a little dice icon in the top left hand corner. You can just roll 1d6 and that will decide for you, removing any difficult, hard decisions from your day. Well, at least till the game starts. With this all decided and done, you move to deploying your units in line with the deployment guidelines of your mission. The actual how of deployment and what's a good deployment? For now, if you're going second, be a little bit more defensive. If you're going first, pick your targets and attack, with an eye on the mission at all times. More on deployment and the zen of planning good reserves and ambushes will come later. Thanks again to our friends at Micro Art Studio. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, give us a like, subscribe and hit the bell to keep up to date with our videos. If you really enjoyed it and want more, please consider joining our Patreon, link below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.